Hello Hans, welcome to the studio. Today we're going to talk about the turning flight. Now you have a lot of experience in performing turns with a Cessna Citation jet aircraft. I would like to know, let's assume you're flying at a nicely trimmed flight condition, just straight and level, and you would like to perform a gentle standard turn. Then which actions do you actually take?
Well, we, of course, I would start with rolling the aircraft by deflecting the ailerons, and then the aircraft would go into a turn.
Yep.
And because the lift factor is tilted into the turn, we need to pitch up to increase the lift factor, because otherwise you're going to descend. And because, first roll, then pitch up a bit. And because you're pitching up, you have a larger lift factor. That means that you have more drag, and therefore you have to give a little bit more throttle to maintain your speed. And then you can make a perfect turn.
Okay, maybe it's nice if I visualize this lift factor to see if we understood it correctly. So if this would be the rear view of the aircraft with a bank angle, then the weight of the aircraft is of course pointing straight down. And if we only bank the aircraft, then the lift factor will be tilted, right?
Yeah.
So the vertical component of this lift factor, which is L cosine of the bank angle, that is actually smaller than the weight.
Yeah.
And this is why we actually have to increase the lift factor in order to balance the vertical equilibrium.
Yeah, and you do that by pitching up. Yeah.
Okay. Now, since during a turning flight we're actually changing the heading, so I would wonder, do you also make use of the vertical tailplane and the rudder during such a maneuver?
Yeah, but we do not use it to change our heading, but we use it to counteract for some effects. If you start to roll, you deflect the ailerons. So one lift, in this case, the left wing will have a deflection downwards, creating a little bit more lift on this wing and hence a little bit more drag. So the aircraft will have the tendency to push its nose a little bit out of the turn. So that's called adverse yaw. And that means that we use a little bit of rudder into the turn in order to counteract this.
Okay. And are there also other effects besides the adverse yaw in the sense that you have to apply rudder during a turn?
Yes, because if you take a look at the center of gravity and the center of pressure on the wing where the forces act, they are not aligned on the longitudinal axis, and that means that during the centripetal force, you will have the aircraft also has the tendency to rotate a little bit out of the turn. So during the turn, you always have to have a little bit of rudder in the turn. So a little bit of right rudder in a right turn.
Yeah, well that's good to know, because in these pictures we actually always assume that the aircraft is just a point mass.
Yeah.
But these additional effects we cannot neglect, of course.
No.
Now, you've explained how the maneuver is performed. Do you also look at several flight instruments when doing so?
Yeah, on the primary flight display we have the basic T, we have a lot of information. But during a turn it's really important always to focus on the bank angle that you have, the pitch angle that we discussed. But of course you need to maintain your altitude, so you also look at your altitude. And you have to have a little bit more thrust because you have a little bit more drag. So that means that you also take a look at your airspeed indicator to have a constant speed.
And then, okay, so you apply thrust to maintain speed, you increase pitch to basically counteract for to stay at altitude.
Yeah.
But how do you make sure that you're actually changing at a certain constant turn rate?
Yeah, we have the turn coordinator. So in IFR, you always turn with the standard rate, and it means that you're turning with 180 degrees per minute. So you always aim for that standard turn. That's also giving you a bank angle where you, for approximately 25 degrees, where you can still walk down the aisle and have a cup of coffee. So that's passenger comfort. That means that when you are turning, you need to have to take a look at your turn coordinator, which has markings on the rate 1 turn.
Okay, so that tells you whether you're going fast enough around the corner, so to speak, or not.
Yeah, whether you have to bank a little bit more or bank a little bit less. Yeah.
And how do you actually finalize a turn? So now we discussed how to get into the turn.
Well, you also have to take a look at the directional gyro to see your heading, because the turn is from one heading to another heading, and then just before you reach the final heading, you have to rotate the aircraft or roll the aircraft back to wings level. So you have to anticipate that.
And then at the same time you pitch down a bit and reduce throttle again.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Hans, thanks for this very nice explanation of the turning
Okay.
maneuver.